Hello there. Welcome to Just the Discs. We talk about Blu-rays here. My name's Brian, and today I'm just going to run through mostly recent Warner Archive Blu-ray releases. One of them is a little older. I want to say from a few years back now, but I was reminded of it and went to watch the Blu-ray after it was discussed on the Video Archives podcast recently. And that one is The Illustrated Man from 1969, I want to say, with Rod Steiger and Claire Bloom. And so this is one that Quentin Tarantino and Roger Avery talked about on Video Archives podcast. And I remembered hearing the ads for it on the radio in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So it was clear that this was a movie that Tarantino had at least some memory of, and he talks about it in the episode as a movie he saw when he was like 7 or something, and how some of the problems he had with it then he still has with it, and they're legit problems. I totally get it. For those that don't know, this is based on the Ray Bradbury book of the same name, which is about a character. I believe it's set in the Depression era, 1930s, backwoods America, where we have sort of a drifter played by Robert Dreyfuss, who happens upon another drifter played by Rod Steiger in one of the great Rod Steiger performances. That's definitely something they can agree on in the episode of Video Archives, is that Steiger's performance is pretty great in this movie, especially the first 20 minutes of it is just outstanding. As getting to know him is pretty fantastic. He is a real interesting character, this guy who got himself some skin illustrations. He was a guy working in a carnival and found this woman had a farmhouse nearby where she did skin illustrations, and it's sort of, in the book, I believe it's a witch. In the movie, I can't remember if they make explicit reference to that or not, but basically he's sort of tattooed. But again, he would say, don't ever call these tattoos. He says it multiple times. And the tattoos, he said, are alive and they move around. And there's a specific spot in his back that if you look into it, you can see your future, and that people don't like that. And then they end up not liking him, and they end up wanting him to leave. And anyway, the tattoos all sort of tell stories in the book. I want to say there's like a bunch of them in the actual book. In the movie, they choose 3 different stories, and so we kind of it's like that, sort of anthology, Twilight Zone-y kind of format. And of course, the woman that tattoos him or skin illustrates him in the movie is his real life wife, Claire Bloom, who's very good in the film. But so anyway, the drifter ends up getting to tell these stories through the tattoos. They're all set in the future. One is about a futuristic society, which I think it's 2047, where families have these like virtual reality rooms, sort of, and they start having some problems with it, where people are actually getting killed and things like that. And there is a logic issue with that, certainly, if you think about it. But that's an interesting one. It's called The Belt. Then there's one called The Long Rain, which is about a group of astronauts stranded on Venus, where it rains constantly, like it never stops raining, and they're in search of a sun dome, which is sort of a refuge from all this rain. But I guess there's some detail in the book that I can't remember if it comes out in the movie or not, but Roger Avery mentioned some ideas like they can't even put their helmets on because the banging on the helmets will drive them insane. So they're just soaked, and they have been rained on for just days and days and days, and they're just trying to find a sun dome that's functional. Some of them they'll find are broken down or just crushed, or I don't know. Anyway, so that's the second story, and the third story is called The Last Night of the World, which is every adult on the earth has the same vision of the ending of the world, and it puts them in a position to make a decision to do something really rash, and we'll kind of have to see how that plays out. Anyway, it's an interesting movie, and the Blu-ray looks nice. It is, I can't remember if it's 235. I think so. Score by Jerry Goldsmith. This one includes a vintage featurette, Tattooed Steiger. It's about 10 minutes long, and it's pretty cool. It's actually showing him going through the process of the tattoos, talking to the executives, talking to each other about the production design of the film. There's one bit where they're talking about the futuristic society in 2047, and they say something like, this is the kind of house we think people will be living in 2047. Obviously now we're in 2022, and I don't necessarily think in 20 years we're going to be living in these kind of houses, but it's interesting nonetheless. So that's The Illustrated Man, and just seeing the process of him getting tattooed is kind of cool. I kind of dug that. So next up we have Rachel, which I was reminded of because of the Last Movie Stars documentary that is currently available on HBO Max right now, all about Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward and their relationship and their ascension to stardom. And it's a great documentary done by Ethan Hawke. He's talking to all kinds of different actors, including George Clooney, and he has friends of his that will voice Paul Newman or Joanne Woodward in certain situations to make their letters that they don't have audio for come to life. And it's really cool. So anyway, I want to say this is the first film that Paul Newman directed. It's from 1968. And it's about a 35-year-old school teacher who kind of has no man in her life. And she is living with her widowed mother in an apartment above the funeral home once owned by her father in a small town in Connecticut. And it's sort of summer vacation time, and she's hanging out with her unmarried teacher best friend, played by Estelle Parsons. And they go to a revival meeting where a visiting preacher encourages Rachel to express her love for Jesus, and she's overwhelmed by the experience, and there's all this pent-up emotion. She's embarrassed, and that's sort of just the beginning of the movie. But the idea is that this man comes from the big city and asks her out, and she begins to have to make decisions about her life and where she wants it to go. And so it's sort of like this person who is very sad and lonely, and now is opened up to all these opportunities that she didn't have before, in terms of her life. And anyway, so this looks really good. It's a great performance by Joanne Woodward, and Donald Moffat also stars. He's in The Thing. I always think of any actor I can that's in The Thing, John Carpenter's film. Produced and directed by Paul Newman. There's a vintage special feature, Vintage A Jest of God exhibitor promo footage, and that's, MOS, no sound. So that's Rachel. Next up, we have Adventures of Don Juan. This is an Errol Flynn adventure film. Warner Archive has put out some other adventure films from him, like The Seahawk. I think we're still waiting on Captain Blood. That's one of his big breakout films that he did with Michael Curtiz. And this is also, I believe, is this Michael Curtiz? No, Vincent Sherman directed this. Sorry, my bad. And this one is, again, a sort of I don't want to say typical, but adventure film from Errol Flynn, Adventures of the notorious Spanish Lothario, Don Juan, and sort of just highlights his life, his romantic antics, Vivica Lindfors, Alan Hale, regular collaborator Alan Hale, made his name portraying dashing heroes. Errol Flynn made his name portraying dashing heroes who clasped a sword in one hand and a maiden in the other. Audiences loved Flynn's devil-may-care bravado as much as they admired his athletic grace and astonishing good looks. The Adventures of Don Juan was his first swashbuckler in 9 years, and a glorious reprise it is. Directed with gusto by Vincent Sherman in the title role, Flynn is a wiser, warmer, wittier version of his earlier characters as he rescues the Spanish queen Vivica Lindfors from the snares of an evil duke Oscar-winning costumes and superb sets. That's one of the great things about these movies, and one of the great things about these Blu-rays is you get to see those sets and costumes looking wonderful in Technicolor, and this is a Technicolor film. Create a lavish atmosphere for dalliances with married beauties, narrow dungeon escapes, and duels aplenty. On guard. This one has a commentary with director Vincent Sherman and historian Rudy Belmer, and some shorts, sort of Warner Night at the Movies kind of stuff. So a nice package of a Blu-ray for Errol Flynn fans, and I hope we get Captain Blood at some point, honestly. And lastly, we have Abe Lincoln in Illinois, and I feel like they have put out a couple Abe Lincoln films. This one stars Raymond Massey, I think, and it says featuring one of the most masterful matchups of actor and role in the screen history. This stirring film of Robert H. Sherwood's beloved play takes a thoroughly human look at the early years of the 16th U.S. president with all his frailties and strength of character. Best Actor nominee Raymond Massey, who originated the role on stage, plays the future great emancipator in the chronicle of his backwoods childhood and first romance with Anne Rutledge, Mary Howard, through his phenomenal rise to president-elect, besting the great orator Stephen Douglas, played by Gene Lockhart. Ruth Gordon also does a memorable work as the driven, ambitious Mary Todd Lincoln, whose vision of Abe's destiny will not be denied by anyone, including her often reticent husband. And this has an audio-only bonus Lux Radio Theater broadcast from 1940. Very curious to check this one out, especially with Ruth Gordon in the Mary Todd role. Definitely sounds like a fun, well, not fun, but a interesting historical portrait, based on a play that I wasn't aware was a big hit or a big deal. So, Abe Lincoln in Illinois, that one is from 1940. So that will do it for this episode. Just wanted to alert you to these Warner Archive titles. And we have a couple horror movies coming in October. There are the original Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, the 1930s version with Frederick March, and the Mark of the Vampire is the other one. And I'm excited for both of those. And I'll definitely try to talk about those on the channel circa October when they come out. But always keep an eye on what Warner Archive is doing, as they are always doing interesting things, in my opinion. So anyway, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.